Morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. We'll kick off the webinar in a minute. We'll just allow people to join. Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for joining this webinar today. My name is Catherine Cross. I work for the Australian Water Partnership as a strategy and partnerships lead. So I'd like to welcome you to this FAO and AWP hosted webinar, Flowing Forward, Navigating Water Sustainability in Agriculture on the Road to COP28. I'm joining you today from Maitland, which is Wonnarua country, and would like to acknowledge the First Peoples here as the traditional custodians, owners, and knowledge holders of the land and waterways. I pay my respects to all Aboriginal elders, past, present, and future, and respect the unbroken, deep cultural and spiritual connection Aboriginal people have with this country. This first webinar aims at presenting innovative tools and methodologies to help pave the way for sustainable water management in the Asia Pacific. So I would first like to hand to Caroline Turner, who's a program manager with FAO, and she's going to give you a short introduction.
Thank you, Catherine. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, thank you, everyone. Hi, my name is Caroline. I am the program manager for the Next Generation Irrigation Program and also the Asia Pacific Water Scarcity Program. Both programs are carried out in partnership with the Australian Water Partnership and various technical partners within their network, and as well as FAO's network. Next slide, please. Today, we bring you to this webinar to introduce to you the Next Generation Water Management Policy Briefs. This briefing collection has been developed to inform policymakers of new and improved approaches to different aspects of water resource management. Each brief promotes a different cutting-edge approach to water management that are being developed and implemented by FAO and our partners. The content of these briefs are a total in 7. However, we're just launching 4 today, and hopefully there'll be many more to come from 2 of FAO's biggest programs. The first program is the Next Generation Irrigation Program. Next slide, please. Sorry, the first is the Asia Pacific Water Program. So the Asia Pacific Water Program is a twin sister program from the NINA's Water Scarcity Initiative program. The WSP aims to bring agricultural water use within sustainable limits and prepare the agricultural sector for a productive future with less water. We have assessed the scope of water scarcity in the region, evaluated effective management options, primarily in water accounting and allocation. The aim of the WSP is to support governments to make improvements in governance and implement adaptive water management in the agriculture sector using appropriately and newly developed tools and methodologies. The water scarcity program is currently being implemented in Cambodia, Indonesia, Thailand, and Vietnam, and we're actively looking to expand this piece of work beyond these initial countries. Next slide, please. The second program is the Next Generation Irrigation and Water Management Program, which is a program we have carried out with AWP that is just about to wrap up. This program was very innovative. It focused on global best practices to accelerate and modernize irrigation systems and water management practices. Specifically, the program looked at cross-cutting issues in irrigation and water management, such as irrigation performance, food security, ecosystem health, gender equality, fisheries, and aquatic biodiversity. The NextGen program aimed to promote and implement integrated and evidence-based policies and practices in micro and macro environments using technological and organizational and social innovations. Next slide, please. So today in our webinar, we'll be discussing the first 4 briefs, and they will cover the significance of real water savings, a better understanding of the importance of irrigation performance, understanding the benefits of consumption-based water management, and present an extensive analysis of water modeling capacities in the Asia-Pacific region. Of course, we are holding this webinar in the lead up to COP28, and it's very, very important that we put the water agenda central on the climate agenda, as there are many, many linkages that we need to consider, and also, you know, some very profound cross-sectoral issues that need to be tackled. Next slide, please. One of those big cross-sectoral issues is water for the environment, which is covered in a number of our briefs and also in our talks today in real water savings and consumption-based water management. We'll also look at irrigation performance benchmarking and water modeling capacities, as I mentioned. So here are the first 4 briefs, and here are our speakers. At the end of our talk today, we'll have an intervention from our colleague from the Near East and North Africa region, from FAO. He will be presenting on the Regional Water Scarcity Initiative carried out in NENA, as I said, as a twin project to ours. My hope today is that you walk away from this webinar with some new knowledge and some new tools to carry out water management at the national level and hopefully improve practices. So thank you very much, and I'll hand back to Catherine.
Thank you, Caroline. I'm really looking forward to hear all the different speakers today. Just if you would like to introduce yourself, please do so in the chat. So introductions chat, Q&A box. So I'd like now to go to the next speaker and to the next presentation. If we can go to the next slide. So the next speaker is Tanya Imran, who's with Future Water. She's a consultant researcher at their office in Wageningen in the Netherlands. And she's going to be talking about real water savings in agriculture, about the RARWAS tool and water accounting methodologies. So over to you, Tanya.
Thank you so much, Catherine. Hello, everyone, and good morning from the Netherlands. I'm Tanya Imran, and Catherine already introduced me, but I'm working at Future Water based in Wageningen, and today I'm quite excited to be talking about real water savings in agriculture. I think if we can go to the next slide. Because this is a topic that really challenges your existing concepts and understanding. So it will be relatively hard to digest, but at the same time, it brings in a lot of new perspective, which we believe is critical for sustainable water resources management. So yeah, next slide. We know that irrigated agriculture is really the largest consumer of water even today, and much of our focus and attention has been on water use efficiency, looking into improved irrigation technologies, looking into how can we save more water as we also hear more drop per crop. So yet we continue to hear, next slide, that water stress is really growing across the globe. We see a lot of countries heading towards water scarcity, which is ultimately threatening our food security and also our livelihoods. So despite all these heavy investments in water saving technologies, we still continue to see why is water stress on the rise and why are countries tackling or critically being harmed by the water scarcity issues. Next slide. So we are definitely getting something wrong, or we're missing something, right? Because in principle, improved irrigation techniques means water savings, but at the same time, we've also observed increased water consumption at a larger scale. And if you look at these 3 variables, they don't really add up nicely, right? So something is definitely going wrong. And we've identified 2 key issues. The first one being the misinterpretation of losses, and the second one being the absence of controls on water allocation. And I'm going to be talking about these 2 issues in detail. Next. So the first one is, of course, how we understand losses, right? So imagine a farmer that is applying water to his field, and everything is fine because he has enough water for his field. But then you also have some surface runoff or drainage that the next farmer is using for his irrigation application. But at the same time, you also have some percolation to the groundwater, which again, another farmer in another area might be using or abstracting for his irrigation techniques. And then if you see the system at a larger scale or from a zoomed out perspective, you see that all of these fields are linked to one another because they are depending on recoverable flows that are being applied to the fields. Next slide, or just next click. Yeah. So when we talk about go back. I like to put animations because I think it's nice to explain, but yeah, I'm not controlling the slides. Anyway, so when we talk about reduction in irrigation application, because our understanding as water managers or users is that if we reduce the amount of water that we're applying to the field, we're saving water. But this is not the case because drainage and percolation through groundwater can be reused and need to be considered when we talk about real water savings. Next slide. The second key issue that we identify is the absence of controls on water allocation. And this is less to do with hydrology and more to do with human behavior and psychology. And the easiest way to understand this concept is imagine you're a farmer who can grow 20% more crop per hectare with a new variety. And we've done this experiment many times across different countries in the world. And we always ask people, would you increase your cultivated area in this scenario, or would you maintain your area because you can already obtain a higher yield? And of course, as farmers, they want to lead to more production of crops, which means more income. So they always go for option A, which is they want to increase their area. Next slide. And this is basically referring to the Jevons paradox, which in a nutshell says if you have increased efficiency, in this case, we can talk about water efficiency, it most commonly leads to increased demand and overall water consumption. So even with these water saving technologies in place, you see that more water is being consumed. So at a larger scale, you see that they're not really real water savings. And we say that real water savings can be achieved if the amount of water supplied is reduced and also reallocated elsewhere via a robust water allocation system. But in many regions of the world, especially in the developing countries, we see that there is no comprehensive or enforceable water allocation system in place, which is why farmers tend to use more and more water because there are essentially no constraints on the amount of water they can consume. Next slide. And this is a FAO publication released in 2017, which really nicely sums up whether improved irrigation technology can save water based on evidences from different regions of the world. And it concludes that introducing high-tech irrigation in the absence of controls usually makes the situation worse in the sense that your consumption per unit area increases because the area irrigated increases and farmers tend to explore more ever deeper sources of water just to fulfill their irrigation demands. Next slide. So bringing these two concepts, we wanted to integrate because at field scale, we realized, okay, farmers believe that drainage and percolation are losses and they can't be recovered. But at a system or a basin scale, we see that these are actually partially recoverable flows that can be used by downstream users. So we wanted to develop a tool that integrates the two concepts and quantifies these recoverable flows so that we can estimate real water savings. Next slide. Now, a lot of you might have already come across tools that look into these water component or fractions, but then they are either too data intensive or they're complicated or, frankly speaking, very overwhelming for practitioners to use. So we decided to keep it very simple and just follow the water. Next slide. Next slide. Yeah. So the concept is very simple. You have water use on your left, also some change in storage. And this water use then categorizes either into consumption or return flow. So within consumption, you have beneficial consumption, which is ideally what we want. In this case, it could be transpiration from the crops. Next. Or you can have non-beneficial consumption, which is next, evaporation from the soils. Similarly, for return flows, you have a recoverable component, which is the water that is percolating into your groundwater, so aquifer recharge, or treated wastewater that can be made available for reuse again. And then, of course, we have non-recoverable return flow, which is water that has gone into your saline aquifers or polluted aquifers or is draining into the sea. Next. So based on this concept, we built in the REVAS tool, which allows you to assess the impact of field scale crop water interventions on basin scale water savings. Next. And the key distinction is that reported water savings, what we see in most of the reports, is based on just the reduction in water use. By using this tool, you can see that the reduction in non-beneficial consumption and non-recoverable flows is what leads to real water savings. So this distinction is very important for the tool. And why did we develop it? It's okay, next slide. We have field scale models such as AquaCrop and CropWatt, which look at field scale interventions. And then we also have WEEP and HEC HMS, which is looking at a more basin scale assessments, but there was a gap, right? So there was no tool that looks at field scale interventions and then gives you a basin scale perspective or outputs, which is what REVAS fills in. Next. Next. Yeah, so I wanted to also quickly put in a real life example or case study that we assessed through REVAS. And this was a field study done in Nepal where they looked at furrow irrigation versus drip irrigation and reported they had 75% water savings. Next. And using the tool, we realized when you put in the numbers, of course, the tool is not very data intensive, so you need very few variables. But you can see with the reduction of irrigation application, the real water savings at a basin scale were only 6%. So we believe that when you have the apparent water savings of 75%, they can be very misleading also for decision makers to make their decisions based on this. Next slide. And to better understand this, the tool also gives you visual outputs. So you can see on the left is the field scale where you have your losses, but also your inputs. And then on the right, you have your system scale. And over here, the distinction is, of course, the recoverable and non-recoverable fractions of drainage and percolation, which are used by downstream users. And these are quantified within the tools. And this is next, how we report real water savings. Next slide. Future Water also developed a very comprehensive guidance on realizing real water savings, looking at different interventions categorized by water, agronomy, and soil land use management. Of course, this is a very detailed report and I won't go into the details, but the idea was to highlight that there has to be a cap on the overall water use and the amount of water supplied, because you need to have the same net consumption, right? So if farmers are able to extract more water using water efficient technologies, then it really does not lead to real water savings. Next slide. So
1 minute left.
just to summarize, first, we need to rethink how we define losses, because part of drainage and percolation are recoverable flows. The second point is, of course, reduction in runoff, drainage, and percolation at field scale does not imply or mean water savings at basin scale. They can be much smaller, and in some cases, you might have no water savings at all. Third point is, of course, downstream reuse needs to be considered, because the system, of course, is depending on recoverable return flows. And lastly, in the absence of a robust water allocation system, we can't prevent increased consumption despite using all of these water saving technologies. Next slide. I know this is a lot of information or a very short webinar, but I've put in links for the additional information in case you want to look at the technical details, the documents, and also our capacity building programs. If you have any questions, even after this webinar, you can either write to me or to my colleague, Peter Drugers. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tanya. I think I learned a lot in a very comprehensive presentation you gave on the REVAS tool. And it definitely gave perspectives on the need to have a more realistic and holistic understanding of water savings across scales. So if anyone has questions for Tanya, again, please put them in the Q&A box, and we will just have a discussion at the end of all the presentations. So next, the next presenter is Evan Christensen, Evan Christen, who's an irrigation management specialist providing consultancy services through Panevi Services Limited in water and soil management. The work that he's presenting was undertaken through Blackwatch Consulting, and he's going to be talking about elevating irrigation performance from farms to organizations. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Next slide, please. I'll be moving quite quickly through. Next slide. So the project objective was to develop an irrigation performance assessment framework for Cambodia. So there's a request by the government of Cambodia to understand how their irrigation schemes were performing and were there any affordable methodologies to do that. So there are four main areas that they wanted information: collecting scheme level data, monitoring operations and maintenance, and then prioritizing schemes for capital investment renewal. That's what was really in their mind. And obviously after that, measuring success of the investments made. So that's what the framework was intended to meet those objectives. So next. So we had to think, what are the criteria for such a framework in Cambodia, a developing country? So firstly, simple. So that could be applied with the levels of tools, technologies, experience, and skills that were available, easily available, affordable. So obviously low cost, reliable. So that had to be robust across different agroecologies and locations. Local meaning that the performance measures and the inputs and everything was locally relevant. And lastly, very importantly, scalable. So I wanted something that could provide insights at a single scheme level or sub-scheme level, right up to comparing across the whole country. Next. So we came up with three questions which would guide the framework, which was how well does an irrigation scheme deliver and drain water? So drainage is really important. How productive is that scheme? And how well is that scheme managed? So using that information, we wanted to answer the question, what are the key factors limiting an irrigation scheme? And then knowing that, which schemes could needed investment? And then what are the results of any investment? So next. So we came up with this table where we allocated performance indicators to each of those questions. And those indicators are internationally recognized indicators. I haven't got time to go through them all, but all those indicators together help to answer those key questions. Now, normally this is done through a questionnaire and survey method, and that's what we also adopted, but there's a limitation to questionnaires and survey, which is that you can't, it's very expensive, you can't cover a whole area. So we wanted to bring in remote sensing because that has that advantage of being cheaper and covering the whole area. And you can see that the remote sensing doesn't pick up all the performance indicators, but it picks up some key ones. Next. So two data collection methods were used, as I mentioned. The questionnaire for farmers, farmer water user groups, government staff, water managers, agricultural extension, and then the remote sensing we could use to look at the surface water area, so that's flooding, if you like, and the total cropped area in different seasons, and the total irrigable area that's actually being managed. What's next? Next, please. Yeah, so why have, I wanted to explore a bit further, why have these two methods? So a questionnaire provides detailed information on all the indicators and explains why things happen, but can only cover a small portion of the area and it's slow and costly. Remote sensing is great because it covers the whole area and it's low cost, but doesn't give information for all those indicators and doesn't explain why things happen. Remote sensing is pretty good at showing you what happened, but not why. So you need to combine the two. Next. So the farmer questionnaire was very short. So only 9 questions, carefully selected questions targeted at those 12 performance indicators. And this is what we want for that the questionnaire could be conducted quickly, so reducing the cost with relatively unskilled persons. Yeah. Next. Yeah. And so in the field, we found this questionnaire only took 15 to 30 minutes, and our target was 20 minutes, so it was well within that. So that provides that ability to do more farmers for your money, and also reduce the cost of the questionnaire. Next. Remote sensing methodology, just very briefly, we looked at the wet season, the dry season, and we did a ground referencing, which the cost of doing the ground referencing was about 5 cents per hectare. Then using that ground reference data, we did the data training, developed functions, and that fed into the performance indicators. Once it's all set up, obviously, it doesn't take much time at all to do analysis of an area. Next. So we piloted it at the Tang Krasang irrigation scheme in Cambodia. We broke that into 3 canal commands for the analysis. We did remote sensing, and we surveyed about 25% of the farmers. Next. Here's some results that I can show you. So the 2 pictures on the left, the dry season in 2020 and the wet season in 2019. You can see the light green, and that's basically rice. It's all rice growing. There's the rice grown areas in the wet season, and the dry season. You can see there's a lot more grown in the wet season. Now, using the can you go back, please? Using the rice yields from the questionnaire, so we didn't have to. We had that data, and we had it broken down for the different canal commands of what the farmers told us was their dry season and wet season yields. We had the actual rice areas from the remote sensing, so that gives you that total coverage. The questionnaire is only 25%, but the remote sensing gives you the total coverage. Put the 2 together, and you get the rice production for the whole area. Now, some people will say, "Oh, you can do rice yields by remote sensing," but that is technically needs a high level of expertise. So we want to keep it simple and obviously very real down on the ground. What do the farmers actually experience? Okay, next. Here's just an example of questionnaire data about farmer satisfaction with the scheme maintenance, and you can see 2 of the canal commands had high level of satisfaction. The other one, Tang Krasang, was lower. We were able to get information on fees paid, all sorts of things. Okay, next. And here's an example of the effect of infrastructure investment. So the pictures across the top, I hope you can see that the canals are installed over time and they get longer. And we can see that in 2016, there weren't any canals introduced in 2017, 2018. There's a little bit of rice pickup. 2019, 2020, you can see the rice growing area increased a lot. And so from this, we could see that the irrigable area increased from about 5% of the area to 69% of the area. And we could see it happened over time. Interestingly, you can see that in 2017, 2018, the canals were in, but there wasn't much rice production. So, I mean, that's something to think about. After the money was invested, there wasn't much rice production. So what was holding things back? So this kind of analysis enables you to ask questions about why did that happen by talking to farmers and staff. Next. So then we moved on to doing some scheme level comparisons. We picked 4 schemes across Cambodia and did a comparison. Next. Okay. So if you look at the top graph, there's 4 schemes there with 5 years on each. And the top one is a dry season rice percentage of the area. And we can see in the Tang Krasang scheme on the left, there's a gradual improvement in in rice area. The next one, Okra Nyak, the rice production is higher. It's a bit dropped down in 2019, but picked up again in 2020. Interestingly, in Prek Chik, rice production started pretty high and then fell away. In Ochak Chit, sorry, all Cambodians listening for my horrible pronunciations. There was rice production in 2016, and then it was basically fallen away to nothing. So the data from the remote sensing gives you clues about questions to ask about why did this happen here or there. Okay, next.
Right, Evan, you have a minute left.
Yep. So thank you. Then you can put this together, put that kind of information together in reports with different information, pictures, tables, graphs of the relevant questions. Next. So just to summarize the last two slides, yes, we thought that this was a simple approach. We was able to be implemented the questionnaires by university students, and we can make that easier and cheaper, affordable. It's about $2.50 US for a field survey and 5 cents a hectare for the remote sensing, and we think that can be reduced. The reliability was good. Obviously, we could refine some of the questions to give more insights. Next. Okay, don't know what's happened there. Next. There we go. Local, yes, it was very targeted. We were able to use all the local staff and local people, and scalable, yes, we're very able to scale from a scheme to national level. So thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much, Evan. I thought this is a really insightful example of combining scientific data and local knowledge, and how remote sensing information can be used effectively, along with the knowledge of end users and put to practical use. So again, if anyone has questions for Evan, please put them in the Q&A box, and we will move to the next presenter. So this is Dr. Emma Kamadi, who's an international environmental lawyer and entrepreneur, with particular expertise in wetlands, freshwater, and the intersection between human rights and water. She's the co-founder and director of legal and partnerships Restore Blue. And she's going to be talking about Treading New Waters, consumption-based water management. So over to you, Emma.
Thank you. Thanks for the introduction. Next slide, please. I'm coming to you from the lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation here in Sydney, Australia, and I'd just like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I'm talking to you today about consumption-based water management, which is a technically and legally demanding area of water management. This presentation will provide the briefest of overviews. If you're interested, I'd commend to you the manual on the subject, which was published by the FAO just a couple of days ago. Next slide. So the first few slides will provide some background and contextualizing information about the work we've done on consumption-based water management. It actually, or the manual actually, had its origins in a workshop which was held in Beijing in late October 2019. I was fortunate enough to attend together with a multidisciplinary group of experts from across the globe. Our primary objective was to understand how consumption-based water management had been pioneered and implemented in China in two particular river basins, the Hai River Basin and the Turpan Prefecture, to learn from their experiences of developing this particular water management framework, and to see how it compared to irrigation efficiency projects, which, as Tanya has already mentioned, in certain contexts have been found to actually increase water consumption as opposed to result in genuine water savings. And we were also interested to see whether the Chinese experience could be applied in other parts of the Asia-Pacific region. Next slide, please. The context for consumption-based water management, which, as I mentioned, is designed to result in genuine water savings, is obviously water scarcity and growing competition for water in the Asia-Pacific region. You would all no doubt be familiar with the broad drivers of increased demand, which very briefly are population growth, food production, and associated economic development. We'd argue that the impacts of the demand side drivers are being exacerbated by what I would characterize in many instances as suboptimal water law and governance, a continuation of over-extraction of surface and groundwater resources, and all of this is being compounded now by the impacts of climate change. Tanya's already touched on some of the issues with irrigation efficiency projects, but again, this is part of the context, which is important because the work that's been done has found that in certain basins in the Asia region, they have actually increased irrigation efficiency, hence the interest in seeing whether or not consumption-based water management could be pioneered in some of these particular contexts. Next slide. I don't really need to go into this because Tanya did a brilliant job of discussing it in quite a lot of detail, but very briefly, there's been some work done by the FAO and others, which has found that the unused portion of saved water can be reused by the farmer to support crop intensification or the expansion of cropping area. It can reduce return flows. And this is particularly a problem in catchments which don't have legal and governance frameworks in place, which constrain catchment or basin-wide extractions, hence the net increase. Next slide, please. So very, very briefly, what is consumption-based water management and what is its potential role in addressing water scarcity in the Asia-Pacific region? So briefly, consumption-based water management, as I've already mentioned, can be used to generate genuine water savings, and this can in turn address over-extraction in irrigation-dependent basins. It does this by ensuring that water is very strictly allocated to water users on the basis of actual consumption, and by this I mean the net volume of water that's required to produce the crops in question. Tanya's already mentioned that actual consumption is also known as beneficial evapotranspiration, or ET, as opposed to non-beneficial ET. So this in turn reduces non-beneficial ET or even ET more generally, hence the water savings. However, because it is a technically and legally demanding area, certain elements do need to be in place to generate these water savings. So in the first instance, water rights have to be codified, but they also need to be defined in terms of three key elements: water extracted, consumed, and then return flows. And then when this is combined with appropriate monitoring and enforcement, which is always key, this allows for much greater control over these three elements of the water cycle, and in turn, much greater certainty with respect to water conservation or savings. The second element is it's necessary to monitor ET and crops to track any land use changes so that allocations can be adjusted to ensure that consumption remains within specified limits. And then you can use this information so that target ET allocation is compared with actual ET to determine the basin water balance. And then subsequently, you can make adjustments to water allocations to again ensure that consumption remains within specified extraction limits. Next slide, please. So it is technically, legally, and more generally, a complex and demanding area of water management. So just briefly, on the technical side, it's necessary to have capability in two key areas. The first is remote sensing, which Evan has already touched on and mentioned can be somewhat complex. And this is required to estimate consumptive demand, historical analysis of ET and cropping data. And the second is that you need good hydrological modelling to specify consumptive use quotas, which can also be known as allocations. And these are monitored using the remote sensing, which I just mentioned. You also need reliable water accounting, codified water rights, property rights, water allocation processes, and associated institutional or governance arrangements. And you also need broader limits on extraction to ensure that consumption is constrained. Next slide. So just very briefly, for my concluding comments, I just note that because it is a demanding area of water management, we found that a number of steps would need to be taken before consumption-based water management could be implemented in most Asian countries. As I've already mentioned, this This includes ensuring that a number of features are in place, including water accounting, allocations, monitoring, setting water aside for environmental flows, and ensuring that there's a formal water rights regime or entitlement regime in place. In many contexts, these steps would require fairly considerable changes with respect to governance law, institutional mandates and capacity, and also would require the acquisition of a range of specialist technical skills. Finally, as has been the case in China, where they've piloted this in 2 river basins, we'd recommend that it's developed and implemented on a pilot basis, with this strategy providing an opportunity to test and refine its application within a very specific context. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emma, and thanks for that overview, giving the challenges of managing water and understanding how water consumption is is very complex, but we need to ensure that this information is available to have effective and equitable water allocation. So I will now, again, if you have any questions for Emma, please put them in the Q&A box. I will now move to the next speaker, who's Thanapon Piman. So Thanapon is a senior research fellow with the Stockholm Environment Institute Asia, and he's going to be talking about water modeling in the Asia Pacific, a comprehensive analysis.
Thank you very much, Kathleen, for introductions. So, hello everyone. I'm Thanapon Piman, based in Bangkok, Thailand. So today I would like to present the study on the water modeling capacity in the Asia Pacific. Next slide, please. So this work this work happened in 2019. SAI provide technical support to FAO under the water scarcity program, try to understanding water modeling capacity and use in Asia Pacific country. So next slide. As Caroline mentioned about water scarcity program, so this webinar try to look at the methodology and tool, to saving water and also to do better irrigations in the Asia Pacific regions. And we know that water modeling is a key tool to provide powerful capability in collecting data and simulating a current state and future scenario for water resource management, for crop planning, disaster risk reduction, and climate change adaptations. So better understanding of water modeling capacity and the extent to which modeling is used in the policy development and implementation is essential to effective investment in improving water management and planning for related sectors like agriculture, energy, environment, etc. And in this study, we are focusing to look at the water modeling capacity in 7 countries in Asia Pacific, including Bangladesh, Fiji, Indonesia, Myanmar, Nepal, Thailand, and Vietnam. So the methodology that we use to do the assessment is through the literature review and the online survey and also the interview with the key decision maker and technical officer of water related department agency in these 7 countries. I remember that this project, next slide please. I remember that this project happened before the COVID hit, in 2020. So that's why this is also first a challenge for us, to correct the information to this kind of situation. And I think this is the first time that we try to use the online survey and use the online communication with relevant agency, in 7 countries. So it's very challenging, but at least at the end we can manage, to get kind of very good feedback from those 7 countries that we are targeting for this assessment. So the first result from the assessment that I would like to show to our audience here is the main thematic area of model application in the select 7 countries. If you look at this graph, you can see that most of the model in these 7 countries is used for first hydrological forecast, warning, and assessment. Followed by, I think, the research and development, and next is water resource planning and management. So only 10% that modeling is used for agriculture, water resource management, and maybe less than 1 or 2% look at the reservoir operations, what else? Education and trainings. So this is also give the idea that the most important of the model used in this region, they are mainly focused on the water forecasting, particularly for flood and drought event. That is, I think, the main cause of the water resource management challenge in those 7 countries. Next slide. And yeah, in this study, we are not look only one direction, that how the information of the modeling is used for the policy maker or policy planning process. We also try to look at two-way combination, how policy also look at the result of the model in their decision. So this is very key from the study, showing that the modeling result mainly used for the policy formulation, providing analytical option solution, in the strategic development, So that is maybe the main use of models. Followed by policy implementation in terms of implementing measure, on ground, and followed by setting agenda, raising awareness, So this is how the model result is used in those 7 countries. Next slide, please. The main gap and barrier in using model in the selected 7 countries, first of all, is linked to the monitoring data. As we know that you need a good result of the model, so we need a good quality of input data. And of course, in the developing country, the monitoring data is always a challenge, to collect information on the ground in terms of timely and spatial manner. And we found also that many countries, the data is still stored in the paper format, in the paper format, So that's why it's always easily to have kind of error in data input, and also lack of data sharing among different agencies in the country itself. And the last one that we always see also from interview, there are lack of the data quality control to meet international standard. Next slide. Most of the work on the modeling, to support country basin for water resource management in the selected country is carried out or is done by the international consultant. So that is also a key. It means that the country is still lack of the technical and research management skill to improve use and application of the hydrological model remote sensing. As you heard from the previous presenter, there are a lot of existing tool data, particularly remote sensing information now is very important input for the modeling. But again, if you look at the practice, who done the model for the country, from the result of interview And survey is show clearly that most of the work is done by the international organization. Only few national consultant or maybe a national research organization that use the model for influence policy. And we also see the infrequent updating of the model software. That is also maybe because of the limitation of the budget, and also it's not regularly use of the model. So that also linked to insufficient of the skill in building model and interpret lesson. So consequently, the model output are frequently used at the department level, but not effectively inform decision making at the high level policy development. So next. So from my last part of studies to provide the recommendations, it is clear from this analysis that that much remain to be done to enhance modeling and its effectiveness in improving the design and implementation of policy need to effectively tackle the challenge that each country is facing. Next. So we provide a recommendation in 3 areas. One is integrations. So it's recommended it still need scaling up the model use, from case to case to expand the application. Also integration in terms of data among different agencies, improve coordination among different agencies in the country to have better input data to the model, and also wider benefit, of the use of the model results. Secondly, is linked to the institutional reform. We recommend to establish a center body for data center for each country, to bring data together in the applicable format and ready to use for the modeling result. I can give you example like Thailand case. Now, after reform, the institutional, there is kind of one institute have responsibility to collect, store, and manage the data at the country level. That very helpful in streamline all the information and very easy to use the data for the modeling purpose. And of course, we need to test a new way for collaboration, because I think this kind of collaboration mechanism is depend on country by country, and also always have the political influence time to times. And the last recommendation is about the engagement. So it needs a long-term planning for capacity building to using a model, because what we heard from every country, they build a lot of capacity, but most of the trainee, they always change the position and they are not really consistent or secure the capacity for long. So that is also a challenge. So they need to create an innovative platform that can bring more stakeholders in the model development. It's not only the modeler to do the model. I think we need to look at the process of modeling, try to engage more stakeholders to move forward for inclusive of modeling approach. And the last one, it need to minimize the duplication in investment. In each sector, they also try to develop their own model, but particularly it's quite similar, on application. So this is also very important, to look at this area. So that's all from my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Thanapon. And thank you for presenting this analysis around modeling and how what the gaps are, how can it be improved for effective application, especially by decision makers. So we will now move to our next speaker, who is Mohammed Al-Hamdi. He is the Senior Land and Water Officer and the Delivery Manager of the Regional Water Scarcity Initiative at the FAO Regional Office for the Near East and North Africa. And he's going to be talking about successes from his region, his region's water scarcity initiative. So over to you, Mohammed.
Thank you, Catherine, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all attendees to this webinar, and thanks to our colleagues in VAP for inviting us to highlight the issue and give a brief overview of the water scarcity initiative in the Near East and North Africa region. So next, please. Yeah, next. Before well, I know it's difficult to be the last presenter, but the scope of this presentation is different. The region is different. I'm not going to discuss a lot of technical issues, so I hope you bear with me for the next 10 minutes. Before I go into the initiative, I just want to give you key facts and figures on our region, the Near East and North Africa region, or the Arab region. As you know, this region suffers greatly from water scarcity. Freshwater availability per capita has declined by more than 75% since the 1960s, mainly due to increase in population and higher demand because of livelihoods, because of economic activities, etc. 12 countries in the region are among the highest 15 countries with in the level of water stress. 60% of the water resources in the region, or even more, originates from outside the boundaries of the region. Most groundwater aquifers are overexploited. Around 82% of wastewater is untreated and not reused. So you see, we really this region is a hot spot when we talk about water scarcity, water management. Next, please. Now, just to sum up, physical water scarcity is a big problem. Inefficient utilization of water. Usually, there is inefficient irrigation systems, low water productivity, a lot of network losses. And of course, with groundwater, the situation is really alarming. Has there been efforts in the countries of the region to tackle this issue? Yes, a lot have been done, especially when we look at the policy, the institutional elements of it. A lot has been done, but again, it's not enough. So there is, in many cases, a weak science policy interface. Policies are not based on research, not based on evidence on the ground. The legal framework is challenged by the law enforcement capacities in many of the countries. We do have very good water laws, but they are not really fully implemented. The institutional framework is rather weak and needs development. Technical capacity also needs, like in many other countries, similar countries, needs a lot of capacity building. Technology and innovation, there is low investment in research and also low adoption of innovative and technology solutions. The policy directions sometimes are conflicting. You see, water agriculture are not, in many cases, aligned together with unified visions. Next, please. Yeah, what FAO has done is, already 10 years ago, in 2013, the Regional Water Scarcity Initiative was born. It was launched in the Land and Water Days in Amman, Jordan, and it actually aims to contribute to inclusive and sustainable development within the context of increasing water scarcity. And it looks to do this through policy coherence, especially between water agriculture. It looks at partnership and collaboration, and this is the element of it. That's what I really want to highlight today, is the collaborative nature of the Water Scarcity Initiative, be it within the region, at the technical level, at the political level, and across the regions with the inter-regional technical platform, where we initiated the collaboration with our sister office, regional office in Asia and the Pacific. We have done a lot in working with the countries on the tools that are required to properly manage and strategically manage water resources in terms of water, the tools on water accounting, water productivity, the nexus approaches, etc. We're also looking at non-conventional water as an important source of water. from the supply perspective, and also groundwater management. Next, please. What I will highlight in the next few slides is the collaborative aspect of the water scarcity initiative. As I indicated, one of the main elements is policy coherence between water and agriculture. In 2019, there was a milestone in this, the first joint ministerial meeting between water and agriculture took place during the Land and Water Days at the League of Arab States. So it's an ownership by the intergovernmental process within the region. They endorsed the Cairo Declaration, which is a document that goes beyond water. It looks at markets, it looks at the enabling environment, goes beyond water in a sense that it looks at what affects water management in the region and has specific recommendations there. There was also a setup of a joint ministerial meetings every 2 years, and they established a high-level joint technical committee that meets every year between water and agriculture, and also a joint secretariat for this process. The theory of change is these joint ministerial meetings look only on cross-cutting issues between water and agriculture. And the way to do that is they identify those issues, they prioritize those, and then they ask partners like FAO and ESCWA and others to prepare a technical position, which is discussed and then translated into a political position. And then we try to pilot that political position at the very local level, learn from it, and then go, and then the countries can upscale at national level, and then we correct the policy directions at regional level as well, and then we move to the next cross-cutting issue. Just give a small, and of course, all of this helps to strengthen the science policy interface. I'll give an example on one of the first cross-cutting issues on this was water allocation. So we introduced water allocation at the technical level. We introduced the experience from the case from Australia, for example, in the first technical in the first meeting of the high-level joint technical committee. They took action on it, and then we moved into developing guidelines for water allocation for agriculture in this region. It was adopted, and now we're piloting that at the local level, trying to learn from it in order to revise and improve the guidelines, and countries can upscale to national level. Next, please. Now, that is a collaboration within the intergovernmental process with the policy orientation, but at the same time, we do have a technical collaborative platform on water. We have something like 20 regional organizations that are coming together on this platform. It is a platform where these organizations signed a pledge during the launch of the Water Scarcity Initiative that they are willing to work together, draw on the collective knowledge and resources so that they actually make a change on the ground. So we're coming together, and since 2019, there has been a modality for structuring this platform. Next, please. And we do have now 4 working clusters. And you can see the first working cluster on resilience and climate change adaptation, the second on water productivity, and the third on non-conventional water, and the fourth on water governance. Now, the coordinators for these working clusters are different. There are 2, and they lead the coordination for that particular working cluster. Now we do have countries becoming members within these represented in these working clusters. The idea is really for the process is to exchange, to know what each other is doing, and to try and coordinate activities. But the overall aim and let's say the important element of this is that we do joint planning together in the future so that we complement each other. I can see, Catherine, you've opened your, yeah, I'll just try to speed up. Next, please. Yeah, now in that effort to really move towards joint planning, we have come together FAO, ESWA, EGBA, ICAR, DAIMI, UNICEF, and others like the League of Arab States, Arab Organization for Agricultural Development, ACSAD, RICRI, so many regional organizations. We have come together to develop a program proposal. And you can see there are 3 components of this program on governance, resilience, and knowledge. We do have something like 17 outputs out of this program, some 70 activities that we're all implementing together. And you can see that this collaboration is really going to be very useful for the region and for the countries in the region. Next, please. I must say here that the government of Sweden and the Netherlands are proactive in this. They are promoting this, and hopefully they will come with the necessary funds to fund the program. In the interregional perspective, we do have the interregional technical platform where we have reached out to our other regional offices and the policy briefs that we assisted and we helped in collaboration with our colleagues in RAP to develop. Those is one of the let's say fruits out of this coordination process. We have established a one FAO team for the regional offices and headquarters, and we need to exchange more, to learn from one another. Not only that, but also extend to our partners and stakeholders that in each of the 5 regional offices. Next, please. Yeah, finally, just some reflections. Water scarcity in this region is a big challenge to sustainable development, and climate change is really a very important factor in that. Improvements are visible, but they have not been enough. Political will is the important elements for meaningful improvements. Cross-sector coordination and policy coherence is not an option, it is really a must. Timely technology transfer and using innovative solutions are key in facing water scarcity. Something a lot of the discussion in the previous presentation talked about remote sensing, technology, innovative solutions. Those are very important to adopt. Technical capacity and evidence-based solutions are important for decision making. And water scarcity in this region is too complex to be addressed with only one organization or at the political level. It really needs for all of us to come together, and that's what we're trying to do at the Water Scarcity Initiative. Thank you, and this is my last slide. Over to you.
Great, thank you so much for sharing your experiences. It's very impressive to see the efforts made in your region, and the level of cooperation is encouraging. I also would like to make a pitch for the technical collaborative platform. It's an excellent knowledge sharing platform, and encourage participants of this webinar and your colleagues to explore and sign up for the regular updates. It's a really good source of information. So we are now going to move to discussion and question and answer. There's been quite a lot of questions that have been asked in the Q&A box. And I see that the presenters have answered many of them. So I have a few questions as well, but please feel free to continue asking questions in there. So maybe just linking the last presentation from Mohammed to the introduction from Caroline. So this question is for Caroline. So how do you see the experiences from the Near East, North Africa region informing the approaches being undertaken in agricultural water management in Asia and the Pacific region?
Thank you, Catherine. I guess like the Water Scarcity Initiative in NENA and the Water Scarcity Program in the Asia Pacific region, it is very much a program that approaches the governance angle of water management, trying to get that baseline of governance in government. Similarly to the WSI, we have gone first with trying to get government support for looking at water management at the baseline. So looking at water accounting and allocation. And one of the most fundamental principles of doing that is to form national multidisciplinary teams, which is what we're doing in the Water Scarcity Program. And from there, From the development of multidisciplinary teams, we can start to look at water interventions that consider more than just one sector or one set of priorities amongst stakeholders. And so I think a lot of the presentations today present that kind of case that water management needs to be a cross-sectoral endeavor, and where we start with that is at the governing level. And I think similarly to the WSI, the WSP is aiming to intervene at that level and then bring in technical experts to support those multidisciplinary and cross-sectoral interventions in government.
Thanks, Caroline. Maybe just building from that, Mohammed, I wanted to ask you, what have been the drivers to move towards policy coherence, and has there been any resistance? And if so, how is this being addressed?
Yeah, thank you. Before I answer the question, just to also add to what Caroline has mentioned, is we're not really in a point to breach or teach others on how to do it. We're actually learning, and we're trying to also learn from other regions on how they are tackling the issue of water. I'll just give an example: transboundary water. I think Asia and the Pacific has done a lot of work on transboundary management, tackling that issue, and I think there is a lot of issues that we need to learn here in this region, given the importance of that point. Also, the issue of water quality. How do we manage better water quality? So we look at the collaboration between the different regions is that we all benefit, we all learn from one another. Now, going back to your question, as I mentioned, this issue started 10 years ago. So time is the element. We need, external forces are important, like what we do from FAO, what we do from the UN, or from the, let's say, development partners that are supporting the intergovernmental process. We need to be persistent. We need to be patient. The official policy development process in this region is very slow. So we really need to be persistent and committed to this process. It took us years. It took us like 4 years to go around to the different organizations, to the technical secretariat of the Ministerial Water at the League of Arab States, the Arab Organization for Agricultural Development, and the other stakeholders, to try and convince of the added value of this and give them evidence that different strategies on water and agriculture are not aligning. They're talking about the same thing, yet implementation is not aligned. And that is convincing. I mean, nobody would contest that, and they all agree on the need to do it. It's just to try and operationalize that is a slow process, provided that we also provide some resources, some financial resources. That is also an important element. So if there is a meeting that needs to be done, we support financially the organization of that meeting. So we've been reliable. I think that is the key. You need to be a reliable partner and then go with the pace that suits the intergovernmental process. And we have done that. And that is why there is more trust building between the countries, the intergovernmental process at the League of Arab States and the development partners. Eventually, we become one team, and that's what we're aiming at. I hope I was able to answer the question.
Great, thank you so much, and thank you for highlighting the importance of playing the role as partnership broker, and enabling that continued trust building and relationship building. So maybe just stemming from the discussion so far on governance, I have a question for Emma. In regards to the consumption-based water management approach that you presented, I was just wondering, in places where water tenure or water rights are mostly informal, how are these taken into consideration?
It's a very good question, and it's something that we did touch on in the manual that we wrote. Within the context of informal or customary water rights, which are a very important part of water management frameworks and approaches in many contexts, it would be quite difficult, I think, to implement this kind of management framework, simply because it's just so, it is so technically demanding. The Chinese context, I think, politically, legally and technically is relatively unique, and that's partly why it's been able to be pioneered in those two river basins with, as I understand it, good results. Someone actually asked an interesting question about whether or not it could work at a local level without a formal water rights framework, but where water users actually agree to, I guess, a local governance approach, which I thought was a really interesting question. I think in theory that is possible, but it would still need to be coupled with the necessary level of technical expertise in remote sensing, so that you can, and hydrological modelling, so that you continue to track ET over time and make sure that you are limiting water allocation to actual beneficial ET or consumption for crops.
Great. Thanks very much for that. And yeah, I think it also highlights the importance of having different sources of data, different sources of knowledge and information to have an informed approach. So maybe building on that, I have a question for Tanaporn. Well, two questions. One is, so quality of data you mentioned is often an issue. So how can this be improved? And then secondly, how can model outputs be better communicated to inform decision making? Oh, sorry, you're on mute.
Yes, yes. For the quality control or quality improvement in the country that we have studied, yeah, there is a rooms or kind of a suggestion, to modernize the information system. That is maybe the first step that the country is looking for, because when they improve the database system, so that can be held in terms of data quality controls after that. And of course, they also try to develop a standard, a guideline for data quality control in different type of data, like GIS data, remote sensing data, or hydromet data. But this is, of course, still need kind of resource, and also the expertise that have to build along with the kind of developing modernized data management system. Secondly, in terms of interpretation or use the modeling result to influence policy, that is also a key, because of there are many challenges to digest the complexity of the model results, and also to build understanding for the policy maker on your tools. So my suggestion is, of course, the modeler or the technician have to simplify the result into the keyword or key message that policy interest in the format of infographic, or in the format of simple graph or table that can pitch the kind of interest from the policy maker. Or the second approach is to engage policy makers in the beginning. When you try to develop model, you need to communicate with them in the beginning what kind of information that you would like to provide, and get their feedback, what exactly they need. So that's why if this happening in the beginning, that will be guarantee that the result that you produce can be used and easily to understand to the policy maker at the end. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Tanaporn, for elaborating on that. So maybe related, my next question is to Evan. So I wanted to ask about the trial in Cambodia, whether there was involvement of policymakers in this trial, firstly, and secondly, was the view that the investment in the monitoring, the approach that you outlined, worthwhile? Was it worth the money?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so we had the involvement of the Ministry of Water Resources. So we had the policymakers there, and also importantly the Ministry of Finance. I'm not quite exactly sure of the terminology, but Ministry of Finance. And so the Ministry of Finance had the question of investing in irrigation and what's the return and how these investments performing. So that was a really key question that needed that hard data. The Ministry of Water Resources obviously were more focused on the production side and the use of the water, and so they were asking, which schemes are more productive, producing more. And in terms of the feedback we had in terms of the investment for the information was that they were quite impressed with the amount of information you could get for the costs that we were putting forward. However, it depends on how there's a lot of irrigated area in Cambodia, and it depends how much you want to do at a time. And we suggested a kind of a rolling assessment, over 5 years or 10 years, that schemes get assessed and then compared and so on. It still needs a set aside of money to conduct monitoring and evaluation, and often this gets left till the very last element, or only in a situation where there's a bit of a crisis and things have to some hard decisions have to be made. At the end of the day, we didn't get to the point of a full-scale rollout, but I think that could happen, and I think the return on investment would be good if that could happen, by knowing where to invest and what the real problems are compared to what assumed problems may be. I hope that helps.
Yeah, the involvement of government policy decision makers, and also the reality of implementation. So I have there's been a few questions for Tanya, and I also have a couple. So I guess the first question was how can the findings that you've put forward, so the question's disappeared, so I'm just going to find it again. How are the findings that you presented, how would that be able to be applied in places such as Pakistan, specifically for the water intense crops? So that's the first question. And then I had a couple questions about how do you take the environment and environmental water needs into account? And finally, how is water quality taken into account? So I'll let you answer those, and if there's any other insights that you would like to share.
Thank you, Catherine. You briefly summarized 3 questions, even though we had 30, and I was going really fast. But good questions. I'm also very happy to see a lot of interest in REVAS and also the concept. And this is precisely why I also just started my presentation with a disclaimer, because I know it really challenges your existing concepts and understanding. And it takes a while to digest, of course, but I'm glad everyone is thinking along these lines. The first question, of course, is how can we apply it? And I just wanted to highlight through these water accounting trainings, we also developed case studies using REVAS, because you can do a scenario analysis. So Of course, I didn't have time to really go through the details of the tool, but you can develop 3 or 4 scenarios, changing the input variables. So if you have different cropping intensities or different cropping water requirements, you can analyze or feed the input data to the tool and then see the impact of different interventions at your basin scale. And we actually did this for the canal command areas in the Indus Basin in Pakistan very recently, earlier this year. So I would be also happy to share how the participants, because it was a training on water accounting and allocation with FAO Pakistan, where participants were really able to use the tool to draw up different scenarios and see the impact on the basin scale. So we have seen a lot of applications of REVAS, not just in Pakistan, but also in other studies. And as the links Caroline guided you to through the e-learning platform and also the technical documents, you will see how this tool was also used in Iran, in Nepal, and also many other countries. Second question, which is also very interesting, how do we take into account environmental needs? And this is something I always ask people, like when we talk about downstream users, a lot of people instantly think about farmers or people who are living downstream, but this can also be your wetlands, this can also be your ecosystems. So environmental flows are crucial for ecosystems and for biodiversity. So when we talk about downstream users, as humans, we always consider these as human consumers, but they can also be your environmental or ecosystems and environments. And this is how return flows can also contribute to your environmental needs. And your third question was, sorry, your third question was?
Yeah, it was on taking how
water
to take
quality,
water
exactly.
quality into account.
Yeah. Thank you. So I had a lot of interesting questions in the chat about how real water savings are calculated. And I highlighted that real water savings are basically a reduction in your non-recoverable return flows. So that's water going into your saline aquifers or draining into the sea, or basically becoming unfit for use, which means your water quality has deteriorated to such an extent that the next user cannot use it, or the downstream users. So yeah, in water quality is a key parameter when it comes to water availability. We try to also separate these two topics, but actually we need to consider that when your water quality is bad, that means you have less water available. So they're very intertwined in that sense. And in this tool, of course, the greater the non-recoverable flow becomes, the fraction of it, the less water savings you have. So water quality plays a very key role within the tool. And I had one of the participants, attendees, actually asking me whether water quality then has to be treated. Of course, the tool does not talk about desalination and treatment processes, but based on the percentage savings or the values you get for non-beneficial consumption and non-recoverable return flows, you can already see what you want to prioritize. So the tool really highlights the problematic areas and areas where you have potential for saving water. I'm not sure if I fully answer your question. But yeah, if you have more questions, again, my email address is there in the chat, so feel free to write, and please do go through the resources that we also highlighted, because I think they really explain in detail what the tool does and how it accounts for real water savings. And thank you again for all the questions. I really enjoyed answering all of them.
Great, thank you so much, Tanya. So we're gonna move to wrapping up. So before handing over to Caroline to just say some final words, thank you to all the presenters today, and thank you for the participants for all your questions, your engagement. I think it was very active. It was insightful to hear about these different approaches and tools and methods that can improve management for agriculture and food security across Asia and the Pacific. So I'll now hand over to Caroline to provide some closing remarks.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you all of the speakers, and thank you for the audience for all of your wonderful questions and interactions on this webinar. I just want to wrap up by saying that the programs that we're running at FAO are very ambitious. We're seeking to raise the bar in water management across the Asia Pacific region. And we are looking at, the foundation of governance and the foundations of water management, and questioning some of the assumptions that we've made over the past few decades in how best to manage water. We're always looking for partners, and we're always looking for new and interesting things to do. So if anyone found the presentations today particularly interesting, please reach out. This is the first and foremost rule for our programs is we want to ensure collaboration with as many stakeholders as possible. So again, thank you to all our speakers and our presenters. I think today has been a very successful webinar, and yeah, thank you very much. Round of applause.
Great. Thank you. And you can find the link to the various the QR codes and to the various briefs that were mentioned. Many of the links are in the chat as well, and yeah, we'll continue to disseminate. I also just wanted to mention that there will be another webinar with FAO and AWP in January on unlocking waterways, improving river connectivity and restoring ecosystems. So I've put the link in the chat. So if you are interested, please sign up now. Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.